Hey everyone, welcome to the new tutorial. This one's going to be all about shadows, but I thought I would do an advanced shadows tutorial. So we've actually already done one of these before. The first shadows tutorial was 46 tutorials ago, if you can believe it. So there's been a lot of tutorials since then, so I thought it's about time we do a new one. But this time I want to push it further. In the first tutorial, I focused on different kinds of shading on a face or a head bust, but this time I want to focus on using these shadows on a full body in action, different kind of structures as well. So I'm going to try one on Killer Croc with all that texturing and see how the shadow can work on that. We're going to do Spider-Man, a lot of different things. So I want to try it out in action. I want to thank a patron for suggesting this tutorial. So that's thanks to Dummy Durs Z on Discord, and you suggested that I should do a tutorial about this, so thank you for that. And yeah, I recommend anyone jumping into Discord to check out that section. And yeah, suggest away. I'm always looking at it, and I'm open for suggestions. So let's get right into it, and let's play around with some different types of shading. Here are a lot of different examples of some shading here, all with different light sources, and you can see through this ball here, and this is from the first tutorial. And yeah, like I said, I really want to try these out, but in action poses and full body shots, and each of these portray a different emotion. For instance, this is a very dramatic shading here, and this kind of shading here is used for scary shots. It also adds lots of mystery, and it's just got that kind of scary vibe to it. You have your very lit up shots. You also have one that can portray danger. So it's always very important to consider the shading before you dive into the rendering. Think about the vibe or the feeling that you want to portray on this person or this character, or in this whole scene that you're going to create. Let's mess around with this effect here. So I've actually got that ball sphere up here. You can see I'm going to use that as our light source example. I feel like this kind of shading would really make Rhino here look very dramatic and a little more intimidating as well, and that's the kind of effect that we want. It's a shame that my line work isn't cleaned up here. I would have loved to work on this in a much cleaner circumstances, but yeah, it's still at that rough stage, but it'll do. And I'm going to keep this really simple, just like we did with the shading here, just one level of shading. I just feel that that's going to be a really good way to just get the message across, is just focus on that one level of shading, and that's it. Now in Photoshop, I've just made a new layer above everything just for now, and I'm going to set that layer to multiply, and then I need to grab, I'm going to sample that darkest shadow there. If we have a look at the swatch, it's probably going to be a little under medium, so there's the middle there of the shading. I'm going to go a little darker just because we're focusing on shadows here, and I want it to be quite strong. So press OK, and you can see here as I start to, by the way, I have a sharp brush. It's literally just the default Photoshop brush, very simple, clean. It's got pressure sensitivity in it. That's the kind of brush I'm using for this. So as I go through, and I can also play around with the opacity. If I feel like it's too strong, take it down a bit. Yeah, that we'll work with that. Okay, so right, first thing we need to do is really consider this the light source here. So it's covered mostly in shadow, and then you've got that nice, it's coming directly from above. So I was nearly going to start shading, just it's a habit of mine, and I was nearly going to start shading like this, and but that's not really what I want to get, because that tells me that the light source is kind of coming from front directional, like in front of him, and I kind of want it more dramatic than that. So what I'm going to do is push it back further. So we're going to cover him even more in shadow. So like the shoulder would literally be covered a fair bit there, that bicep. And as you get under Rhino, his whole underbody, you can see he's leaning forward. These are the things you got to consider. Really think about where these shadows are going to be casted. Just a quick example, so if the sun is up directional behind a character and it's beaming down, you've got them rays coming down this way, angular, okay? So that means that the shadow of this entire character, the feet are touching the ground, so that shadow would be extending out, and you have to look at things like this. Think about See that direction there, and from the head down. So that means that shadow is going to stretch right out. So really long. This is for casting shadows onto the ground, by the way, but it will apply to our character. I'll show you why in a minute. So it'll be something like that. Okay, the shadow is going to reach out really far. If that sun was much higher, let's just say the sun is much higher, that shadow would then be, cut right off to about there. Something like that is what the shadow might be cut off to, directional above. And that's kind of what we're going to do with Rhino. I want it to be like nearly above him, but just definitely not in front. I don't want it to be in front because that'll light his face up, his whole body. I want it kind of behind a little bit, or even right above is probably what I'm going to do with Rhino. And that being said, his whole body is going to be in shadow. So don't be afraid to just pack it in. It's okay to really just pile it in. See how his entire body is now in shadow? Now, you'd still have slight rendering through this body, but I'm talking about the overall casted shadow, the majority shadow, the one that's covering most of the area. This is what we're working with. But yeah, it's not like it's going to be just flat colors through here. It's going to have some kind of rendering as well if you were going to push it further. And I find that what this does to your character as well, it really helps create like a strong silhouette of the character as well, which I feel makes them look even more intimidating. You got this giant, big silhouette charging at you, and that adds a lot of contrast to the piece. So if I've got a nice bright background lit up from the sun, or there's a city in the back, it's going to really make him stand out super bold. So let's keep going with it. And then, yeah, when it comes to the face, I know it's kind of scary. You don't really want to cover the face with this shadow, but just do it. It's good to be bold. So I'm going to literally cover that entire face in shadow. Okay, so just be bold with it. Don't hold back. Otherwise it won't work. So you got to really just be bold. Think about, just start by covering it and then just erase. So I'm going around the side of the temple there where I think there might be shadow. I'm going to start, we're going to literally just cover all that area there, and then side of the head as well. Even the horn can have a nice big center shadow because, there's no sun getting to that part of it. So all the way around there. Yeah, and then what we're going to do is go through and just erase. So I'll zoom in a little bit, and now I can start erasing where I think we need to have some light coming in. Let's lighten up those eyes just for fun. I really wish this was a lot clearer, the sketch I mean, but we're going to work with what we got. I'm just lightening up the teeth a little bit there, just for some fun. Really want to show them teeth. So yeah, I'm going to show probably just the top of the nose, where the nose goes, top of the nostrils a little bit, just for some extra detail, and a little bit on the nose. And I'll get those top of those cheekbones in, okay? So we're going to get those to show, and that's really all it'll need, because the rest is going to be pretty much in shadow. And we're going to get that really dramatic kind of look there. And another thing, just shave off some of these edges around the face, and that'll start to really frame the head a little bit more, and just allow a little bit more of that light, allow him to kind of to show that face a little bit more, frame it. It's held together a little bit more, popping out a little bit more. So I'm just shaving off some of those edges. And I might even just shave off a little bit on the top of the mouth there, where the mouth is raising up. And that'll really show some expression from that shading. And the top of the brow there will definitely have a little bit of detail, even in the brow. See how when you start erasing, you can just get some of those features back. But yeah, start bold. Really pack in that shading first, and then chip away at it to what you feel like it works better. Yeah, and the rest is really about detailing as well. So now that I've got the majority of the shading, and I'm going to start going and refining with a smaller brush, sized it down more, and just putting in some lighter details for this shading, and that'll really start to work. Even with your eraser, you can start erasing details in. So like on the chest here, if I want to have that thicker skin kind of showing through, we can do a little bit more of that by erasing. So still keep some larger sections. I don't want to make it look silly, but yeah, going through this eraser will definitely start to bring a lot more detail into him a lot more. So maybe even around that bicep, I'll go the other way. Bring that detailing like a contour around. Yeah, that's much better. Probably should have done that up here on the shoulder too. But you get the idea. But there you go. That's Rhino shaded. It's quite a harsh shading, quite strong, but you can definitely see the drama. So maybe if I took the opacity down a bit more, just so you can see it. Yeah, so like that. I'll hide that example up there. And now you get a lot more drama in the scene. And just like I said, you get a strong silhouette of him charging. So he really stands out to the point where you could zoom right out and still see him charging. Whereas if I had a more mild shading, like, I don't know if you think of it like before, I know that's not really shaded, but it's lightly soft shaded. You can see it's kind of more weak. It's a weaker kind of, it's not as strong. So definitely adding in some dynamic shading like that, thinking about your light source and where it's coming from, and you want that feeling, the drama coming through. So considering all of that, and then you can have a nice strong picture. So yeah. Let's try a quick one with Spider-Man as well. This is from the other tutorial. This was from the, I believe, Anatomy in Perspective tutorial. Yeah, we can start doing some shading on Spider-Man here. Now the example that I want to do on this one, something more like this. So the light's really beaming from the left behind him though. So you got a lot more shading around the back end here. And that's really good for portraying drama. And I want to kind of get that heroic vibe out of it. So let's try and tackle this one. So again, you can see the light sources coming from behind really a little bit more. So I'm going to really start packing in like I did with the other one. Just start bold and start really packing in that shading in large chunks instead of starting small. So really think about those areas that might be fully in shadow, around that leg there, fully in shadow. The whole back of him here in shadow. I'm really thinking about that because I'm going to use my eraser as well to take out a lot. So, you can already kind of get a sense of drama here. Now this arm here is going to cast a shadow like that. Okay. So because the sun is going to behind coming down on him. So I've really got a nice clean cut there where that arm's going to come through. Try and consider things like that because those tiny little tweaks will really make a difference. It's just like a subconscious thing that we see, that some people see, and if it's wrong, it can stand out. Now this is where it's getting kind of tricky. This leg here is definitely pushing a lot into the distance. I mean, I'm just going to cover that whole foot in shadow there. But yeah, you can see this one here. So I believe this leg here is going to be much more covered in shadow. So I'm going to do that. I need to think about things like this. It even more, I believe, yeah, something more like that, like it's really pushing back. And if you feel it, you'll get a sense if something's off, then try and fix it, because that usually is a little radar in your mind telling you that something is off, something's not quite right. So try different things like this, really start playing around with all of this. So now I'm getting somewhere. The majority of the shading is nearly done. There we go. So I feel like that's about right now when it comes to that drama. So now I can start chipping away a little bit more and shaving off some parts where I want some light to go. So I've got a nice rim light coming on the side of that hand there, and then on the other side of this as well. Just trying to think of things like that now. So, some parts that I really like, things like at this angle of shading, you get this silhouetted. Let me deselect that. You get this arm silhouetted out. That shading's quite dark there, but then you get the brightness of this finger because that's in the light. It's catching the light. So now you get that nice, that stands out rather than getting lost. Because that finger is going across the body. Sometimes things can get lost in the rendering, but yeah, that's really going to stand out. That finger, that's really cool. Even these ones here. So they're standing out because they're in light, but this palm here is in shadow. I just like stuff like that, kind of really standing out. So the rest is just, shaving off some edges, kind of like that around the back of the head there. So we still have, that. And so there's Spider-Man's dramatic kind of shading, bit of drama to it. You can imagine, if the setting's there and maybe have a sunset in the back there, it would look quite cool. There we go. So I've thrown a background in. one that I've had before. This was actually from the Miles Morales piece that I did once. But yeah, you can see that sunset in the back there. You can imagine Spider-Man's really getting, that's where all the light's coming from. So, I mean, what if I quickly... I'm going to see what it looks like if I quickly put some light in from that. It'd probably have to be more like a rim light, I reckon. This is not really working too well, but I just want to see what it might look like. And I'm working around the shading, so I'm not really touching the shading there. I just want to see what this might look like. Bit of a hint of a picture. There we go. Might finish this one day. But yeah, you kind of see the idea there. I'm just trying to help him fit in the scene more. But that shading there, you can kind of see it's in there now. So that's kind of working. And yeah, I was originally going to have like a background like this, where he's like chasing the train, but I think this one works much nicer. You get a real clear shot of him, and he's more silhouetted. So again, like I said before, yeah, using that heavy dramatic shadow on the back, so like it's mostly in shadow, you get a lot of that, like he's very silhouetted. Let's darken that shadow and see even more how intense it can go. If I darken that down, you see what I mean? You can get a really dramatic looking Spider-Man there. Gives it a bit of edge, looks more edgy, but still heroic at the same time, if you know what I mean. So it's not necessarily a bad, like, you know how some shading is good for bad guys, and it can make them look more evil. This doesn't really, this still has a half and half. It's really half lit up, half dark, and it just helps make it more dramatic. And still edgy, but still heroic. All right, I'm going to revisit Killer Croc here. So I think you remember this. I've done this a year or two ago when I was doing the Batman range. I kind of really want to complete that. I was going to do the Joker. I was kind of saving him for last, and Batman and stuff like that too, the main ones. But yeah, I will get to those eventually when I get more time. But yeah, here's Killer Croc. I would really like to revisit this because looking at this now, the shading's not right. Like, I mean, it's okay. The reason I did it like this, I'll just quickly explain it, is because I think I really wanted to lighten him up. I really wanted to focus on the line work especially. So, all the hard work that it was in there. So I was like, I really wanted a light source that's going to just brighten him up a bit. So in reality, the light source on this already right now is probably front on nearly, but a little bit above directional. So front on and down, because he's really kind of lit up. Whereas, let's change it. We're going to do it completely different. So here's the inks. I'll just hide that drip of water there. Yep, so I've got the background. Okay, so this is from the Color My Lines inking that I sent through. You'll find that on Patreon, actually. You can actually practice with this guy in the Color My Lines. And that's where I got this from. This is from my line work. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to make a new layer, and that's just for our shading. So simple. Again, we're just going to start really simple. And it's just, that's a soft brush. So I need a hard brush, and then go through and we'll start shading. Now, all right, there we go. So I've just placed in the background. It's actually the original background there, but I grayed it out just for purposes on doing this. Just helps. And now I feel pretty comfortable to go ahead and start shading in the way I want to do it. Now, what I'm going to do is, so the light source that I want to follow is like this. Very, very covered in shadow with a little bit of light coming from behind, basically. Because as you can see here, the light is coming from behind. And that's where I feel like I went wrong with the first one. Not wrong, it's just a different choice. I feel like we can go way more dramatic than that. So let's attempt and see if we can do it. So basically the best thing you can do in this, very easy, just fill him with shadow. Let's just say that's the shadow layer, right? I might just make that even darker to start with. So we're going to go really dark for this. So something more like that. And then play around with your eraser for the rest. So get an eraser, set it to a hard brush. So a hard eraser. And that is going to be what we're going to play around with. Because, most of the work is going to be shadow. So that's why I just filled it straight out. Not even hesitating. So as I'm going away, I'm really just chipping away. You know, I'm probably going to chip away a little bit more than like that. And then as I get down, it'll gradually get less and less because I want all of this to be pretty much just black. So you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I'm erasing all of around the edges quite boldly. But I'm still making sure I keep some casted shadows around the back of these like spikes. So I'm thinking about every little part like its own object. So I need to think about that little bit of shadow that's going to be behind each spike. And as I keep chipping away, I'm getting thinner and thinner with detail as I go further into the body. Because remember, this is really just, think of it like an edge light. From behind, you're only going to get a nice strong light around the rim. And then as it comes in, you'll get a little bit more detail in places like this. So I'm going to start, chipping away at little bits like here on details like that. And as I get even further in, really, really fine. So super fine details to the point where it's non-existent. So I'm not going to do any in here. Really just focusing on these little edges. Even when I get to things like this hand, I'm kind of putting that light right around it as if it's reflecting off the water. So we'll have a slight kind of rim around there, even around each finger. So I'm kind of thinking about little things like that as well. Just because I know that hand is lifting forward a little bit more, I want to make it just have a tiny little bit of detail around those edges, just like that. All right, there we go. So you can kind of see how that works now. Very, very dramatic in the way of shading. So he's literally just covered in shadow. He's supposed to be this huge silhouette of, that you can see that light source in the back. It's literally an opening of the sewer. And so that's where the only place that the light's coming from. And that gives off this kind of really, this horror vibe, almost like a horror kind of vibe to it. It's supposed to be very scary and kind of threatening in a way. So yeah, I like the way that kind of works, and I'm going to play around with it a little bit more. We'll see if we can actually turn it, like put it on the real picture and change the whole setup for that. You can see, like I said, it's really important to spend the time going around chipping away at the parts where the light is still going to hit. So you can see clearly here, little edges, little tiny nicks just down in there to nothing. So it's full black in here. And especially around here. And this is why I wanted to choose Killer Croc for this example, because he just has so much detail that I have to chip away at, and it's very important. So don't hold back when it comes to that stuff. I even tried to just slightly, have some kind of rim light around the head, even though that's probably in shadow a bit too. But yeah, so let's see what happens if we put this on the real picture. So if I go Control A for select all, and I'll copy that entire shading layer. And if I go into my actual working, this is the finished one, and I'll just go Control, like paste in place. There we go. Perfectly landed on top. That's great. All we have to do now is set it to multiply. And you can kind of see there, it's giving off that horror vibe already. Something like that, but it's very dark. There we go. So I've just made some adjustments. I want them glowing yellow eyes. So I kind of want them to kind of glow at us or be a bit brighter. So I might just lighten them up a little bit. Don't want it to look silly though. Maybe something like that, and with like a little shine on there. Yeah, there we go. Tiny little white shine. There we go. So I've just adjusted this, made some color adjustments to make it work. And you can kind of see the difference here. So let me show you. So this is the layer we just did for the tutorial. And if I take that away, you can see underneath without any shading, like it's rendered, the character's rendered, but that overall big mass shading is not there. So now I put that on and look at that big change there. And have a look at this. I'll show you a before. So the original Killer Croc piece that I had done, that's it there. And now I've changed the entire lighting. Have a look at that. See that difference? It's kind of more realistic now almost. The lighting is more realistic in a way. So because like I said, the only light source is from behind, so this makes total sense. So that subconscious thing in your mind is telling me that it's okay now, that gut feeling you get. Whereas before, I was happy with this, and I'm glad you can see more of the detail and hard work in all the line work, but overall that light source is wrong unless there is some kind of frontal light source. But I much prefer kind of that now. I could even go, if I wanted to, well, I can go kind of half and half and have a soft brush with a layer mask on this shading layer we just did. If I bump that up and start to fade away in the middle to bring back some detail, that'll make him look a little bit more like he's coming forward a bit more. Yeah, kind of like that, more cool. And that way you still get that silhouetted kind of look and that edge lighting that we spent so much time trying to do, and you still get to see his face coming at you a little bit more. When someone creeps out towards the shadows a bit more at you, that's kind of the vibe we're getting now. So yeah, so it's basically a different version of the original. So there's the original, and there it is now. So I'm really glad I revisited that and redid the lighting. I kind of don't like how the legs now get lost in shadow. Like the tones are nearly the same as the tail there. You kind of can't see where the legs go. So I'll probably fix that. But overall, pretty happy that, we revisited that. So I hope that helps understand, a different take. We really wanted that horror vibe, a scarier, kind of more imposing Killer Croc, lurking through the sewers and the shadows. So I think that works much better, that new one. And there's the outlined version, so it's more simplified, so you can really see what I did there. And there's a side-by-side comparison, by the way. I mean, that one is way more vibrant. And like I said, more clear, you get to see it more clearly, but this one's more accurate. So that's accurate to shading that you might see, like more of a horror movie kind of thing. But yeah. Here is an old sketch I did of Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones. I think it would be a really good example to work on for, shading a face. I originally had a full piece like this that I had worked on. This was a few years ago. And, I love the show. But yeah, I just bit off more than I could chew, and it's just too big of a task, so I kind of just left it. But I would love to finish this one day. I've got the Hound, we've got all these characters in here, Jon Snow, and Littlefinger over there, and and I actually have a Drogo there, Jason Momoa. But anyway, let's get into Tyrion. I think that'll be a fun example. So I want to go for this kind of lighting right here. So some shading on this side of the faces, which is not what I usually do when I do characters myself. So my light source is usually flipped total 180, and I like to have the light coming in front of us, and you get your whole character lit up. But I'm going to add a little bit more drama to Tyrion here and have the light from the other side. And what this will do, it's a really good way to show 3D structure in the face. Like I want to have you want to show those features a little bit more. It'll bring those out really nicely. And it'll also, it'll set a mood to the piece. A lot more dramatic than just having a character lit up completely. So I think, again, I'm going to start with, silhouetting that character and then just shaving off the other side of the face. And this one, I'm not going to hold back as much. So I'm going to really shave off that whole side, like really, really get all that off there, and then we'll just work on the rest. Something more like this, and I really want to have that nose showing, so I'm not going to cover him completely with shadow. I still want to be able to see the character clearly, but the point is I really want that light source coming from a totally different direction, and that's kind of how I want it. So the casting of the nose shadow, you see that, and that nose is casting a little shadow across the lip there. I want to make sure that's seen. We want to make that top lip have a nice light on there, and I really want to see that chin, something kind of like that. But this is where it gets interesting. So this is where you get that nice 3D structure of the face. So on this side of the face here, shape a nice little triangle, something like that, and then shave that middle part away. And then you can have a nice little fade from the bottom up of that triangle. You know, don't have it too harsh. But we want to make sure we're framing. You want that cheekbone to be shown. So let's structure that cheekbone there. And then lighten that eye up a little bit more. And then last of all, just fill in those eye sockets underneath the eye there. I'll zoom in, sorry. And underneath the eye sockets, you know, make sure there's some shading under those. Which means I'll also shade the other eye socket in underneath there. So just like that. Other side, put some shading underneath. And also underneath the eyelid. So, you know, really, I'm going to cover that whole eyelid there. Since it's, there will definitely be some shadow casted under there. There we go. And the rest is, yeah, detailing. So I'm going through the hair a little bit more now with some a finer brush. But yeah, there we go. You kind of see what I mean. By adding a lot more drama, and we can really get that structure, like this shading and that casting of the shadow on the side of the face. This just adds so much more drama having it this way. We'll get that bottom lip in, that top lip in there. There we go. But I really like how this adds a lot more drama to the character. And then, you know, you can also have, let's say, once you get to lighting, which is not really what we're focusing on today, but you can have, you know, like a nice, let's just say you got a nice little dim blue light from this side. Yeah, something like that. You see how adding, you know, a side light can, you know, add that extra, you know, just a subtle one on that side. And you're really structuring the face even more by having another light bounce off that side. But the main shadow is there, and that's following that. And that's, yeah, a really cool way to go. Wow, this Tyrion here is about, that's pretty old. That's about 10 years old, that one. But I just wanted to show you, that's what it was before I flipped it. The light source I used to always choose. I do this for most. You can see the light is really coming from the front directional, and the shading is on the other side. Whereas this one, the shading is toward us, way more dramatic. Yeah, I much prefer that for a mood. I need to start doing more pictures like this with this kind of shading, to be honest. But yeah, I really wanted to point that out, the difference. You can see the drama difference. There's not that much drama in the shading in this, but the character is lit up, and that's probably why I chose it. I like to light my characters up. But yeah, if you're going to add drama, do that. And I do that a lot with Marvel. When I'm working with Marvel, my main light source is usually front on a directional above, so that you get a nice lit up character. So like this scroll here, you know, the shading's just enough to, you basically really want to light up the character, and that's, you know, a style choice that I've chosen, and it just goes through pretty much all my characters. So here's just some basic headshots of the Fantastic Four. She's a good example. Just the lighting on the face, or the shading I should say, you can see is very basic and very just simplified so that you can really light up that character. Things, fun example as well, you can see every little shading detail on those rocks. You can see it on Mr. Fantastic as well. The shadings all around the side of the face, so you can see that structure. But yeah, very front on kind of lighting there. And I feel like that's a choice I've shown in a lot of tutorials, so I won't show that example of front lighting directional above, which is pretty much just these guys, and everything I've ever done is pretty much that same light source. So let's try more, you know, we're going to branch out and do different shading that I haven't really tried much of yet. So let's do that. Let's work on this super scroll that I've done for Marvel here. So he's got all the powers of each Fantastic Four member: the stretchy power, invisibility, the thing, and yeah, fire powers. So from Human Torch. But this would be a fun one. So I want to make him way more dramatic. Let's do that. We're going to start with a background like this. So what I want to do, and I realize this is the same background I used for my last shading tutorial, the shadows tutorial, with Moon Knight. And but I really want to do something totally different here. Last time we did Moon Knight for this, the shading was from above, and it was from like the moon. So I really wanted that night scene. And this is pretty much the same shading I did for like Killer Croc and that. But this time I really want to use this guy, and I want to have the lighting come from underneath. So let's just say there's like a nice big bright spotlight or something underneath, or an explosion, whatever it is. Let me just quickly brighten it up so you can see where it's coming from. There we go. So you see that? I've got that shading, the lighting underneath. It's going to be real lit up. So let's really get this guy under control, and he has to match that. All right, there we go. I've just put out some, flat colors, just a bright light color. Anyway, let's get this shading under control. So again, I'm going to cover a lot of ground first. So let's just really whack it in, and I want that, the only light sources from underneath. Let's really lighten him up that way. So whacking it in, really throwing that in. And it's so weird working like this because everything's inverted. My usual way of shading is just thrown out the window. So you can see I'm actually putting shadow on top of this leg, which is very weird. And there's habit there. Like I started to shade under there. There might be a little bit, but the light is coming from under, not above. So let's get rid of that. I need to get a sharp eraser. So yeah, I'm shading from above down. So I'm also going to start shading on top of the chest, not under. Usually I would shade under the pecs and the chest like that, but we're going to shade on top because, like I said, everything's inverted. So it's a little strange, but it's getting there. You can see here, shading on top of the chest around the collarbone area. So I'll add a bit of shading there. You can see now, I've done that large chunk of shading. I can really just chip away at it and add, like I can add to it here, like that, or I can chip away at it up here to really start to make it look more natural. But yeah, it's kind of a shortcut to really just throw it in. It can really just help you and guide you in a way. So that's kind of why I did that. Now the face will be interesting because I have to, try and do it the opposite way. So I'm going to probably put some shading on top of the nose like this, on top of the brows where usually that would be in shadow. So definitely cover them, something like this, and that should work. So it's a very, very tricky kind of shading technique, but once you practice it a bit, it's very cool. What this does is it really adds kind of a thriller kind of vibe to it, basically. Think of campfire stories and things like that, where the fire is from underneath and coming up to your face as you're telling a scary story. Like, really adds that kind of drama to it. So this is this super scroll here coming down. This will make him look a lot more villainous. He's going to look very creepy. I think I used this same technique in my horror picture that I did of Freddy Krueger and all the other kind of characters. So I tried to use this technique a little bit in that too. And they're literally standing over a campfire. So yeah, definitely under that bottom lip there can have a lot of shadow on it, I should say. And yeah, top of the lip. Look at this. So the top lip, I feel like that's going to have a lot of shadow on it because that usually goes the other way. So I'm going to try and do that, and then we'll lighten up under the lip. Very, very weird, but it will pay off once we're done. I'll show you. Oh yes, and definitely on the top of the cheekbones where the light usually hits. Now it's shadow. So basically just try and think upside down. Everything's upside down in this. So the cheekbones where the light usually is now all shadow. And then the eye sockets underneath will definitely have light on them though. Yeah, there we go. So I reckon that's pretty right now. And we'll try and adjust this. Oh, I better do that other arm. All right, there we go. So you can kind of see there what that's done. I'll just add a couple of little extra ones where I know some shadow is going to be now that I've wrapped my head around it. You've really got to try and, it's really a big adjustment to the brain, to be honest, to try and think upside down when it comes to shading. Even a little bit on top of the rib cage there, but not too much because it's starting to get really bright there. So yeah, something like that. So you see that horror vibe already. Like, it's really, really kind of a creepy look. So it's you got to be careful what you choose. It's all about the choice here. So let's try and get this to work on our actual character. So using that selection that we've just done with the shading, I'm going to duplicate that off my colors. So now I've got where the shading's supposed to be. Alright, now let's try and muck around with it. So I'm going to go levels and darken that right down. Yeah, you see it's starting to work. So I'm going to go real dramatic with it because it's on its own layer. Real dramatic. And then the other one, I will duplicate that as well, but we're going to lighten that. So go the other way and see what happens. We're just going to test this out. And it'll also have to have a warmer kind of tone to it, I guess. So let's really lighten that up. You can see it's kind of working. It's very, very strong. But color balance as well. If I go more of a yellow tone, it might help. Yeah, you see that? So it's really starting to match the scene a little more. Not green. We're going to, yeah, probably the purpley yellows and reds. I think it would need like a few levels of cell shading to make it look any good. Right now it's very, that's too harsh or something. But once you get the, the flat color over it like that, you can see what I'm trying to get at there. But yeah, basically, you can see it's very, so that's the original underneath, the original and then the new one. So I'll zoom in. The original and new, and you can just see the vibe. I don't think that looks great because it's just not rendered properly. It's one cell shaded level, so it needs a lot more work. Didn't really turn out as well as I thought, but that's okay. It basically just needs a lot more adjusting. A few different layers of cell shading would do it, and it's all about the contrast as well. So I've got to play around with that contrast. I mean, you can see when it's black and white, contrast is great. So that looks really good there like that. I'm going to try one more thing. I tried putting a softer kind of glow over it, but I don't know if that really works that well. It's not too bad, but yeah, needs a lot of adjusting. Something like that maybe, I'm not sure. Yeah, just playing around. You see, trying to muck around with all these different kind of effects. But yeah, the original, and then you can see the massive dramatic change there in shading. So I've got the normal shading that I would do for marble, and then I've got the kind of dramatic shading. There would probably be a backlight, which I'll do actually. I'll try that now. You see what I mean? That rim light there would be added on the back to resemble the glow, like that blue glow from maybe the city lights or the moon even. And that'll help frame the guy a little bit more, and things like this head. So if I take that away, the head's getting lost in the character. So if I bring that in, now the head is structured. You can see it clearly popping out now. I'd probably even do the ears too. But yeah, that light, that dramatic light, it's kind of growing on me a bit there, the way I've done it, but definitely needs a lot more work. It could be, perfected to a point where it's more blended. Like you'd probably just, if I just find that layer, where is it? There it is. And got my eraser, but set it to a half kind of opacity sharp brush like this. Start chipping away. That would help it blend more. You see how it's still cell shaded, but now if I half press, it's chipping away with a bit of an opacity kind of effect. So that's definitely going to help. I'd probably do it on the, like parts of this, but you basically still want to have that really strong contrast. Otherwise it won't work. See, because if I had that faded down, it doesn't look as cool. Oh, well, that's not too bad, but it's not as cool if it needs to have that strong contrast. I'm going to try one more thing. What if I get that and fade it in between the characters? See, that's not too bad if you start to fade it, but I still think the more dramatic high contrast is better. So anyway, I'll stop rambling now. But I think you kind of get the idea there. You chip away, start to render it a little bit better, it'll look good. All right, so that's dramatic underlighting. So, well, I should say shading. It's from underneath. We want to make sure that it's a very different kind of shading there, and a very unique one. And I'm kind of glad I covered it. I really wanted to get into that one. So I hope that helps understand some shading options a little bit more. Where the light source will be coming from. Very, very important to keep in mind. So make sure you give it some good thought before you start, because the vibe can be totally different depending on what you choose. Alright, that's it for this tutorial. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked that one. I had a lot of fun doing that. It's always fun playing around with shadows. So yeah, no, that was good. Alright, well, I will leave it there, and I'm going to work out the next tutorial for next time and dive into that. I hope you all have a Merry Christmas, and I'll see you just before the New Year for the next tutorial. Alright, keep drawing everyone. Thanks for that, and see you next time.